Alrighty, ladies and gents. So the time is 12:25, and we will be starting at 12:30. For those of you that are back, I do want to play a video. It's about 5 minutes. It's reasons why people do property. What is the number one reason why Andrew invests in property, why Bruno invests in property. So we're going to play this video for the next 5 minutes plus minus, and then we're going to start with Bruno and Chili Boy. See you then.
Hi everyone, my name is Bruno Simal. I'm a property attorney and the co-founder of Intergen Wealth. Now the primary reason why I invest in property and why I believe in property is that investing in brick and mortar makes sound financial sense. You create wealth through the passive nature of the investment, and it's something that cannot simply just disappear overnight.
Hi guys, my name is Shilebe Mutiba. I'm a property investor and developer when I'm actually not dealing with tax at Intergen. And the number one reason I'm a property investor and developer is the freedom of movement that comes with having created that wealth. Look behind me, I'm at Durban, enjoy the seaside, guys. This is amazing reason on why I'm creating wealth through property. And you can do the same thing and create that wealth through property. Thank you.
The reason I invest in property is because of this. Here I am in beautiful Jeffreys Bay, spending 30 days surfing and doing the things that I love to do, and property is a great tool to create the life that I love to live. It is a tool that enables me choice in my life. Choice of where to spend time, choice of with whom to spend it to, and of course the funding to do it. Property supports me in creating the life that I love to live, and so can it do for you.
Hi everyone, my name is James Perris and I'm a property investor. The number one reason why I got into property investing was that I wanted to build an investment portfolio over time with any spare cash that I had, that it could eventually work for me. So I wanted something that one day I could rent out, earn money from, and the capital investment grows over time still while I'm earning from it. So that's why I got into property, and that's what I'm connected with.
Hi there guys, my name is Jade Barkhays and I'm standing outside of one of my multi-let properties here in Port Elizabeth. Now the reason why I invest in property is for passive income. I want to build income on the side. No matter what you're doing, I think anyone can invest in property with the right education and being part of the right community. Now I'm part of SAPIN, which is the South African Property Investors Network. Now that community really supports you on your journey to become a professional property investor. So join our community and find out what it's all about.
Hi guys, my name is David McGlashan. I'm from Cape Town. I'm a property investor and part of the SA Property Investors Network team. And I just wanted to tell you one of the reasons why I invest in property. That's because property's been around for 100 years before me and it'll be around 100 years after me. It's the fastest and most secure way for me to generate my wealth for my family and for my future. So guys, I'm looking forward to seeing you, meeting you guys. If you want to join and get involved in property investments, hit the SAP Connect team and join us.
My name is Andrew Walker, the CEO of the Property Academy. I've also been investing in property for a number of years, about 15 years, both here in South Africa and the UK. And one thing I'm doing here in South Africa is investing in property, but helping other people invest in property, showing people how to do it the right way. And one of my tips for today is around due diligence. Don't just go out there, sign an offer to purchase and hope to make money. There's actually a process that you need to follow. One of the most important factors is running your numbers. Do the numbers make financial sense? Have you looked at the gross yield? Have you looked at the return on investment? But now don't get caught up, because sometimes the numbers look very, very attractive, and they could be very attractive for the wrong reasons. So another step that you have to do is due diligence. Make sure you are downloading reports from Lightstone, for example, having a look at sold comparables, comparing like-for-like properties, as well as actually going out and viewing the property. If your gut feeling is saying good, if all the facts you have from Lightstone make logical sense, if the numbers make sense, then you probably do have a good deal. Now, if you want to find out more about how to run the numbers, how to do your due diligence, I've created a free accelerator course for you. Just click on the link below, join, it is free, and see how you get on from there. Cool. There we go, ladies and gents. Just a short clip on what is the number one reason why you invest in property. And hey, if you want to do that as well, and send it into the Property Academy so we can showcase it all across South Africa, please do so. I'm on a mission to go to all the property coaches, to go to the whole academy, to everyone, and ask them, what is the number one reason why, why do you invest in property? Okay, so we are coming to that time now. Let me see where we are. Who is with us? Let's see who's active in that chat box. Alani is just saying, there's a comment, when you do try to book an appointment with Alani or Daniel, when you go in, just refresh it, just to ensure that you do book the right time slot. So the time is 12:30. We are ahead of schedule, which is excellent. And we are coming up to probably one of the most important parts of the convention. So the blueprint has now told us if we want to achieve X, if we want to achieve X out of property, this is the type of structure we should be thinking about, or these are the type of properties we should be buying. This is where Shilly Boy comes in and Bruno comes in to really share with us what is the best fit. And the question is there a best fit, ladies and gents? Is there one size that does fit all? In the chat box, perhaps let us know right now, what entity do you currently have? Do you have a trust? Do you have a PTY? Do you invest in your personal name? Maybe share with Shilly Boy and Bruno right now, what entity do you invest in? Or perhaps you're not quite sure. Just say, guys, I have no idea what entity to invest in. Because if you're investing for the short term, I guess Shilly Boy and Bruno will talk about, should you really have a trust if it's for the short term? If you're going to be leaving a legacy for the next 10, 15, 20, forever, it doesn't matter how long it is, how does that structure look like? Because what you'll probably find is that there is no real structure that suits everyone. And Shilly Boy will touch on this. Depending on your goals, depending on your needs, depending on your risk appetite, will depend on the structure. So let's see what everyone says. Okay. Lazola was saying, powerful convention, fantastic, thank you. Coming back to this, Daniel Kazadi says PTY. Tobacco says PTY. Vaughan says PTY. Lasedi, Kerry, Lungalwa, nothing yet because you're starting out. Doe, I have a PTY with the shareholder being the trust. So for the other investors there who are saying that you invest in a PTY, who owns those shares? Your personal name, another company, another trust? Let us know, because this will give, the more information you can give us right now in the chat box, it's going to help Shilly Boy and Bruno's PowerPoint presentation, because they can talk directly to you. Okay, Jean says a PTY. Audrey, PTY and personal name. So there's a common thread here, Shilly Boy. There's PTY. Some are doing personal name. So this section is going to be a good hour to hour and a half. You've got to listen carefully. You've got to take lots of notes. And remember, questions. Post your questions in the chat box. I'm going to ask my team to copy and paste it into a spreadsheet. So when we do the live Q&A later on at the end of the day, we will be ready to, the panel will be ready to take those questions, but write them down as well. Okay, Maxon hasn't started yet. David is saying personal name. Utobeko currently my personal name. Okay, I think that is it. So Shelly Boy is going to join us first, and then Bruno's going to join us a few minutes later. So let me just see if I can bring Shelly Boy live with me right now. Shelly Boy.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm doing well, Andrew. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I was saying earlier, Shelly Boy, I woke up today, Saturday, and the sun is shining. I thought it was going to be cold, but it's beautiful. In fact, I've told my kids at 4:30, the bra goes on. I'm going to have some lekker steak and some chicken later, and I'm going to chill with the family later. It's a beautiful day. Are you, and where are you? Are you still in Cape Town?
I'm still in Cape Town. I wish I was in Joburg to come and grab that steak, yeah, but I'm here. The weather is so beautiful. Maybe I should make you jealous and go to the beach. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. So this is what's going to happen. Shelly Boy, you are going to now introduce yourself for a few minutes. Give us the background, where you came from, qualifications. Give the audience some context. Who is Shelly Boy? And then Bruno is going to join you probably in about 4 or 5 minutes. And then you share your presentation. Keep an eye on the private chat there so we can talk to you if we need to. But the stage is all yours.
So I've got 4 minutes to sell myself to single ladies, eh?
Yeah, there we go.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, sure, Andrew. Yeah, man, thank you so much for having me, and for everyone who joined us today. I would like to say thank you so much, and also well done. I think it's an important thing to start with, to say congratulations for being here, because it took a lot of avoiding or overcoming the cold fear to take that action to say, I'm going to take this opportunity and learn and be a property investor. So for that, guru for you. And thank you for allowing me to invade your space in your home. You might be watching in a lounge and bedrooms, but thank you so much for. As Andrew introduced me, my name is Shelly Boy Mutiba, and I'm a chartered accountant by a profession. Yes, and funny enough, my story, I always share it with Andrew briefly, that I was one of those who kind of escaped the auditing world and found myself in a property development space years ago. So as I went about developing upmarket houses, and I had a chat, it happens that I had a chat with one of the developers, and he's a very advanced developer, and one of the conversation was touching around how, as a developer, he went about putting a team together, and within that team, there was also tax expert. And he was like, but you are developing houses. How do you use your profession, Shelly Boy, to maximize return? I'm like, what do you mean? And I felt bad, because being a CA, but being asked this kind of a question. Anyway, then he clarified to say, listen, they are, for every transaction that they get involved in, they also look at how best can they actually structure their development projects to maximize returns, whether being obviously certain tax provisions that might be applicable yes, to that particular development transaction. And I think from there, it kind of gave me an idea to say, listen, hang on, what about that retail investor? What about that aspiring investor? And you'll see later on, we're going to be touching on that. What about that particular advanced property investor who might not have a privilege to such kind of an expert advice to say, as I go about the journey of investing in a property space, how do I maximize my return? How do I make sure that I preserve my wealth? Because you'll see also during the conversation that the tax aspects of it is actually more advanced, as various components of it. For someone who invests in the inner city, for that matter, there are tax provisions that are applicable to you. For someone who buys off plan, you will see in our slides, we speak about inefficient investor who buys off plan but don't take advantage of the 18 sex because he found that his properties are scattered all over. But what about that multi-led individual who basically invest in a multi-led and don't take advantage of improvements and capitalize it to base cost. So those are some of the things that made me be passionate and obviously start a company called Intergen with Bruno. And of course, Bruno being a prominent and one of trial and tested and acting within a property investor, we can't find a common ground to say, listen, you've got an issue of property investors coming from a legal point of view, wanting legal structure in a more cost-efficient way, but still giving you guys that premium advice, right? This is where the tax and legal within Intergen came into party. But the beauty about this is that we've got an experience. So just to also closely introducing myself, I'm currently doing my master's in international tax. And I think this is where now we're going to take you guys to say, hang on, you are property investor. You are going to be one of the wealthiest. But how do we make sure that with your mobility, because either you or your kids or your generation are going to be global citizens, and with wealth gives you that freedom of movement. But how are you going to actually move and invest all over the world in a more tax efficient and legal efficient? I think this is why I'm pursuing this international tax and studying those international treaties. And for that matter, so that at some point we can also advise you to say, if you're going to invest with in UK, how are you going to go about in a more tax in legal efficient way? I think that's about it for me. Of course, I still also develop 20% of my time. I invest in development, but I'm more passionate more about helping you to preserve wealth. I think in a nutshell, that's who I am. I'm not sure, Andrew, if you want to jump in and have a conversation while we're waiting for Bruno, or...
Yeah, let's do it. Waiting for Bruno. Bruno's going to put his gel on his hair. He's going to put makeup on. He's going to spray deodorant. And, you know, like attorneys do, they're going to wear the suit and all of it, eh?
Yeah, of course, Andrew.
So I think to start this off with, I mean, I'm sure the people listening and watching right now probably already have questions. So if you've got any questions, not that we'll take them now, but we'll take them later. But also, Shirley Boy can have a look at the questions. What are some of the questions you already have for Shirley Boy, Bruno, the attorney, about protection, about tax, and all of that? So post that right now for us. So Shirley Boy, tell me, where did you meet Bruno?
Oh, that's actually interesting space. And I think this is where now, I like giving background stories before I answer the question, because I think when you understand the thought process is much better. So, and I think this is where, Andrew, I'll say, and I'll not stop saying it, to say the guys that are here, they belong to an ecosystem that Square Feet has created, right? So all I'm encouraging you, before I answer Andrew's question, because Andrew's question is simple, I'll say 7, right? But I want to make you understand the answer, because the whole ecosystem that is created by Square Feet, I mean, there's multiple companies below that Andrew will do. I can't speak for Square Feet. But then what I'm trying to communicate is that it's an ecosystem that it's up to you to actually unlock any opportunity that you can potentially have from the whole ecosystem. So that's how I end up meeting Bruno. We connected, we gelled, and that's how Intergen actually. How brilliant that is! Intergen was founded because of the ecosystem. Amazing. I guess we all use royalties, eh?
No, exactly. I mean, and that's the thing, where did I meet Dave, and where did I meet 99% of my business partners? In fact, the group Square Feet, my new business owners, my new business people. Guess where I met them?
Of course.
This company over here. They came to a Sappin event and they're like, wow, this is amazing. Bryanston Country Club, over 200 investors doing deals, raising money, helping each other. And when you think about it, look at the Curo guys, Shane and Matt. Where did they meet? At Sappin. I wonder if anyone meets people at Sappin and actually get married as a result. I wasn't their husband and wife. You know what I mean?
That's very interesting. I mean, I already raised my hand. Anyway, but jokes aside,
yeah, exactly. But it shows the power of networking, right? Just like you came with me to Durban, you came with me to Cape Town, and already all those connections we made, that's the power of this.
Of course. And I'm a true example of that. I mean, Intergen is is now having presence in Cape Town. That's why I'm in Cape Town. We've got presence in Durban. It all started because of SAPEN. I mean that we need to give a credit where it's due. So, and I think we can't call enough to say the guys who are here interact, participate at SAPEN events. When there's live events, especially live events, where there are live events, support them, get involved, because you're going to meet your core partners. You're going to meet, like Andrew said, he's hoping that one day people will say, we met at SAPEN, they're married, and they've got generations as a result of SAPEN. But the jokes aside, I think guys, leverage the ecosystem. It's brilliant. You know, the opportunities that are coming as a result of SAPEN are beyond imaginable. So some of the things, I mean, when I joined SAPEN, I was not even expecting to even create a company that is now national footprint. It was for me rallying and loving the platform. And I think, Andrew, if I may, I mean, we're still waiting for Bruno, right? So I think for me was also, and I always tell the story that when I started developing upmarket houses, I was in a dark, in a sense that I felt isolated. And
yeah,
because when I was there, I was alone. I mean, we went because of passion. I mean, we were just building with my homeboy, and you know what I mean? Like, so I think they say we must welcome Bruno. Yeah. Why not?
You want to finish the story?
Let's start the story.
Hey guys.
Hey, Bruno. There we go. Wearing your smart red tie today, hey, Bruno.
Yes.
Would be proud of you.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, excellent. So what you've done so far is Shirley Boy has just introduced himself, where he comes from, who he is, why Intergen formed. So I guess if you want to start by introducing yourself, Bruno, on your side, and then you guys can take it away.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks so much, Drew. So my name is Bruno Simal. I'm a specialist property attorney. I started in this industry roughly 15 years ago. I've got a background in litigation and commercial work. When I say litigation, things like contractual disputes, evictions, even rental collections, basically anything that relates to court, and then commercial work, so structuring companies, structuring deals, mergers, acquisitions, that sort of thing. So a very niche in that type of space. All my litigation is commercial related, and I deal a lot with business people, entrepreneurs, and corporates. And yeah, that's where I got this love for business, for property, because this is very, very commercially orientated, and my interest in tax. And then I don't know if Shirley Boy already mentioned that, but that's how we met, because we started debating, and I wanted something done and I wanted to structure it a certain way. And he came with his big book that with highlights and telling me that I need to look here and do this. And that's how we started just brainstorming, and from that moment we just never stopped, and so Intergen was born. I run a firm of attorneys in Sandton. It's called Bruno Simal Attorneys, and then together with that, one of my my primary business, Intergen, tax and legal consultancy, and yeah, and the rest is history, I suppose.
Of course.
Cool. Awesome. Then let me see if I can get the slides to share. But I think we can start in the meantime. 1 second. There we go. I don't know if you maybe just want to take everyone through what we usually do with what we're going to be speaking about. So things, for example, wealth. What is wealth? What is wealth creation, wealth preservation, and the different components of it. And then in the meantime, I'll load up the slides.
Of course. I think, guys, like I said, well done for being here. And I think fundamentally you are here because you want to create wealth, and in this component, you're going to create wealth through property. And I think this is what we always say. But within that wealth, there are components, or rather key weights, that I always say that are very important. And I think that has to do with wealth creation, right? Within wealth creation, you're going to want to preserve wealth. And I think this is where the likes of Intergen comes in a primary form. But secondary also, we're going to walk the journey with you when you're creating wealth to say, how do you efficiently create this wealth so that, another key word, when you transfer this wealth to the next generation, how do you even transfer that? How do you going to make sure that you're creating wealth in South Africa and your child being mobile, want to be in Australia, want to be in US, how to make sure that they can still have that wealth transferred them to overseas? So that's basically the component or the principle of wealth. And we're going to be touching on that. I see the slides are on. I guess, like I said, we said, guys, we're from Intergen. And today's topic is going to be about how best to invest in your investment structures. Bruno, do you want to go on, or should I go to...
No. Let's, they've already met our pretty faces, so that's fine. These are just some of the people that we're associated with. Just a couple of the companies, things that we've gotten involved in, especially SAPN Investor of the Year. That's always exciting. I'm going to love that. Property Academy, and then some of the guys that you guys are also familiar with, the likes of Tough, Expeller, Property Law Alliance, TIPA. So a really good bunch of associations here.
Cool.
Cool, Shilly boy. This is it's yours.
Yeah, sure. And I think, having spoken about the wealth, you saw the slide that Bruno just passed, and it's all about what I was saying earlier. Those key words about wealth. What is this wealth? You're gonna be creating this wealth, but how do you best efficiently create it? Now, with this application of law to investment structure, it's quite funny, and it was topical actually here to this week because of G7 meeting. G7 global, the big seven in the world, the countries that forms a part of G7, and they were looking about the whole international tax reforms. And here's the thing, and I always give you this scenario, guys. You are sitting there. What emotions comes in when you think of SARS? You don't have to answer me. You can tell me during the Q&A to say, I don't like SARS, but I'll tell you that actually SARS is your friend, and we can argue that over the coffee. But again, what do you think when we're thinking of the wealthiest? You see the articles where they say Jeff Bezos paid zero tax, or Trump pays zero. What? You get angry, right? And this is where the tax experts have this view that the media and the analysts are starting to create an image as if the guys who do a tax planning, an extreme tax planning, are sort of similar to the guys who are corrupt or create fraud, right? So commit fraud for that matter. So there's also that emotions that is going out there. You might be having similar emotions, but here's the thing. I'm going to say to you, how about you actually making the application of law friendly to you, so that you also maybe be a victim, and as you creating that wealth, you also fall within those so-called that extreme tax planners. But of course, you'll be doing that and applying that application of law to your investment. And I think this is where Intergen comes in. Bruno?
Yeah, changing.
There we go. So guys, this is today, we're going to speak about different types of property investors. We're going to speak about an aspiring investor. There are guys here who, as I heard into earlier on, saying that some of you guys are starting up. Some of you might have 1 or 2 properties. We might speaking about that of what we call inefficient investor. And we will also be speaking about those who have properties in their personal names, right? We'll also look at those type of people to say, but how inefficient are you? And we're also going to talk about those guys who already have structures. I hear the guys who are saying that I've got a trust and I've got a company that is owned by trust, but are you even running things up efficiently? What happens if you don't run those efficient? But the next few slides, guys, will be speaking about aspiring investors. And if you know these basics, you might want to wait, because you can never know. I know we always throw certain things that you might go like, okay, I didn't know about this, as much as you might feel that you are more of an advanced property investor. Bruno? Cool. Now, this could be you or I, right? In most cases, as an aspiring property investor, in this case, someone who wants to create wealth, these are some of the indicators that can best explain you. You might be sitting there and say, Bruno, I'm married in community of property. I've seen such scenarios. What does it mean if one of my partner, my spouse, get into trouble? How is that going to affect my wealth that I'm working on weekend? I'm sitting here listening to Shilboy invading my space. But what happens if I create this wealth and then my spouse goes out there and get into trouble and then I end up losing this wealth that I invested so much? What about those kids that I adopted them, but they're not officially adopted? Will their well-being be preserved beyond my existence? These are some of the things that might actually be relevant to you. You might be sitting here having several businesses already and looking at diversifying into property space. Of course, how to reinvent that? And you will see we'll give you some of the structures in later on where we show you that some of the structures that can apply to you for someone who might be actually having various business interests and wanting to diversify in a property space. You might be having a partner who's incapacitated. It's a reality. And this is where we always encourage people also to have wills, valid wills, guys. It's a reality, right? You might be having a partner, you guys are sound, you're working, you're fine, but you don't have affairs in order, right? What happens if one of you, God forbid, he get incapacitated tomorrow? What is going to happen to the wealth? Because now that means that your partner doesn't have a valid will. If they passes away, that means their wealth is going to be administered under what we call Intestation Succession Act. And we all know, you'll see later on, we're going to be touching on it also briefly. That's an act that is always being challenged. It's always an act that is always out there in court, and you don't want to leave your wealth for interpretations. So these are some of the indicators, and from now onwards, Bruno is going to be talking about, with these indicators, we all know indicators leads to what? Potential risk, which means that those risks can actually end up being a reality in your situation, which means that for you to deal with this risk, you need to be able, right? You need to be able to do what you call asset protection. And this is where, in most cases, it's about legal side of things. And I think Bruno from here will take you guys throughout on the asset protection. Then I'll come back and then I'll touch on what you call tax efficiency. But now and then I'll be disturbing Bruno, chipping in, disturbing me, chipping in. It's all about fun, guys. We'll be interacting, and I'm looking forward also to have fun with you guys. Bruno, take it away.
Absolutely. And I mean, if anyone wants to send any messages, any relevant questions that we can actually address as we go along, that's actually really cool as well. I'd love to see that because maybe there's something we're not clarifying properly, or we're just quickly jumping over. So if it's relevant to what we're discussing, I'm happy to have a look at these questions, tell Shilly Boy about it. So yeah, let's keep it interactive. Me and him constantly interrupt each other. Typically when we're live, it's a lot easier because the interaction flows. Over like virtually, it's always difficult because then one person coughs and the other one just stops speaking, and 5 seconds go by and you realize that they weren't interrupting you, they were just coughing in the background. So just bear that in mind, please. So from a risk perspective, so all the indicators are there. These are things that aspiring investors typically have when they walk in through our door. And that's how we know they're aspiring investors, because these things exist and not a lot of thought has been given to them. And it's not a bad thing. It's not to say that they've made a mistake. Not at all. In fact, because of the way that many of our high schools don't actually prepare you for work life after high school or after university. Yeah, even a lot of our professionals, our doctors, our lawyers aren't very financially savvy. So there's a lot of things to say about the way that we we run through the system and we get out of the system, and whether we're actually ready for life. So this is why it's important to have those experts around you, because the reality is that there's people that specialize in all these things. And, I often say, I mean, even if you look at the world nowadays where we live in, soccer players, for example, there was a time where your national teams would be guys that started playing soccer maybe at the age of 12 or 15. They still had full-time jobs, but hell, you know what, over the weekend they used to play a bit of soccer. And as time went by, you look at the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi, and you look at the age that they started playing club football, you look at the fact that they do it full-time. There is no other, they're experts in that, and it's very difficult to compete with that. And this kind of now is starting to apply with a lot of the financial, tax planning, legal, because this is what people do day in and day out, one specific little field of it. And so from a risk perspective, you're looking at things that, as soon as the indicators, people walk in, what are the risks that we face through having those specific indicators? Things, for instance, where you're overpaying SARS. So Shirley Boy is going to touch later on how sometimes over 50% of what you get on a monthly basis goes to SARS, because you need to remember your tax brackets, income that you earn in your personal capacity, how much, what your tax rate could be. And then worst of all, what we don't even take into account is on top of that, you're still paying VAT on your purchases at the shop. So even if you're at the highest tax bracket at 45%, factor in that on top of that, you're still paying 15% on your expenses every month, and you're paying that to SARS also. So there's a lot of money that you pay to SARS, and for that competitive advantage, you guys need, like Shilly Boy mentioned, you can't try fight against SARS. You need to use the rules to your advantage and make sure that you make the best out of them, but legitimately. Exposure in the way that you marry. So this is an asset protection perspective of making sure that you're married in the right way, because unfortunately, and I mean, I'd love to be able to ask if people can give me an indication if there's anyone here that's married in community of property, if you know people married in community of property. What I typically find in most of the workshops that I do is that there's a lot of people in the room married like this. And the reason is that society has treated antenuptial contracts or stigmatized it and told people, no, but it's bad. It's you planning for divorce. How dare you start a marriage on a negative note like that? Don't you dare do an ANC. And like, we'll touch on why that's actually not the right thing to do. These are risks as well. Your ability to obtain finance, that's a massive risk, because as a property investor, you need to get as much money as possible so you can buy these properties. If the banks aren't willing to give you money, how are you going to grow your portfolio? It's going to take you really, really long. And then Shilly Boy's already mentioned other risks, for example, are things like family feuds, dependents not being properly cared for, interstate succession he also mentioned. And the one big one that I also worry about is sometimes you've got all these assets in your personal name, you pass away. Remember, there's certain costs that need to be paid. There's bonds that need to be paid. A lot of the times, if you don't have enough money in your estate, the estate starts selling off your assets in order to cover any shortfall. So things like that we need to be careful of. And this is where estate planning comes in. And our discussion over this next hour is going to be how to mitigate this, how to get around these risks. So first of all, before we can even take it any further and start speaking about how to do structuring, we need to understand certain basic principles. And those basic principles we've managed to summarize into these three principles, right? It's asset protection, tax efficiency, and financing optimization. Now, many of you might have heard our talks before, and we've discussed these aspects before. Now, what you do need to understand is, first of all, it never hurts to listen to it again, because there's always new ideas, and it is important that we give these priority. Everyone needs to understand this. So any new people in the room do need to understand this basis before we can even move forward. As we get further on in this talk, there's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff. So any of those people that have heard us before, don't stress. It's not going to be the same thing you heard last time. We always change up the content, but this has to be the same, because we have to emphasize this. We can't keep changing it every day. And that just makes it, that just shows how vital it is to understand these. So you've got asset protection, tax efficiency, financing optimization. In summary, asset protection just means being able to retain, ring fence those assets so that nothing happens to them. They're protected. They're protected from liabilities. They're protected from creditors. They're protected from anything that comes your way. Within a marriage, they're protected from your spouse's insolvency or your spouse's creditors. So this is asset protection. That's what I'm going to be discussing next. Shirley Boy's then going to come in and discuss tax efficiency. Now, everyone realizes what tax efficiency is. It's basically tax savings, paying as little tax as possible. And yeah, he's going to be discussing two principles here. It's going to be your long-term tax saving and your short-term tax saving. So he's going to get to that. And then I'll touch on financing optimization slightly, which is basically how can you do your structure so that the bank wants to give you money? What does it need to look like in order to get that efficiency going? Oh, sorry. Now, the reason why we focus on these three and we leave the trust, the company, and all of these things out is because you don't know what you need until you get this sorted out. So first we discuss this, and then we can get into a conversation on how this would look like, bearing in mind how much weight you want to put on each of these principles, because you can't get them each 100%. So you need to weigh it. You need to figure out what's more important to you, which one you want to give attention to, and then we structure around that. There is no cookie cutter approach. Each person has their own structure, and each person needs to make sure to cater for their own needs. So now let's get started on the asset protection side of things. So three topics that I normally discuss when I get into talks, and it's things that people typically find interesting because it's very relevant, and we're staying very close to home, is the relationship with your spouse. So how are you married? So before you even start worrying about what your structure looks like, you have to start asking yourself, well, you know what, before I start investing, is my personal structure, what's happening in my own personal life, is that right? And I mentioned earlier that there's a stigma around wills, around antenuptial contracts. When people get married, they think that the antenuptial contract is a plan for divorce. So that's the first thing I kind of want to throw out there now. It isn't. It really isn't. I can structure your antenuptial contract so that it has the same effect as being married in community of property. So I can make it fair between you and your spouse. And a lot of times we do, because there's something in South African law called accrual. And accrual basically means everything that accrues after you get married until you die or get divorced gets equally separated between the spouses. And that's what you want. That is effectively what people consider to be fair. So you want fairness, you don't need to get married in community of property. You can get married with an antenuptial contract. So that's the first stigma gone. There's no reason not to have an ANC because it has nothing to do with planning for divorce. An ANC is there to protect you, not from your spouse, but from your outside world, or from the outside world. What this means is if your spouse gets into debt and creditors start chasing them, if you guys are married in community of property, what will inevitably happen is that when they see your spouse and realize that you guys are married in community of property, they're allowed to come after you as well, because it's in community of property. All your assets fall into one pool, which means all of them can get sold for the debt of one spouse. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, why would you want to do that to your spouse? And vice versa. If your spouse is doing things, why would... And I mean, from a risk perspective, if something does happen to one, don't you want the other one to be able to at least sustain a certain lifestyle? You want to be able to hedge your bets. There's no benefit to being married in community of property. It is the default system in South Africa, but it really shouldn't be. So this is the first thing, guys. So how are you married? If you are married in community of property, don't stress. This isn't a situation of, oh, well, it's too late, you messed up, there's nothing we can do. It can be fixed. So deal with this first before you do anything else. Just kind of look at this, go, you know what, we need to make this call, we need to make this decision. Let's go speak to Bruno and Shilly Boy and have a discussion around the marital regime. We can fix it up for you, and we can do it through a court application. There's ways of doing it. Unfortunately, not every case can succeed, because there are unfortunately certain instances where the courts won't grant the order, but you have to ask. Sorry, just if Shilly Boy, I don't know if you want to jump on quickly. Unfortunately, my phone seems to be overheating.
I think.
But until.
Yeah, go on. Bruno. Okay, guys, let me take it on. I see that I think Bruno has issues with the phone. He was speaking about the nature of the what you call matrimonial regime, right? And I was gonna jump in where before he actually even called me. There's an issue around when people entering into antenuptial contract. One of the common silly mistakes that people tend to make, and it's around them not disclosing in that antenuptial contract what we call the commencement values of their wealth, right? So if you are intending to actually get married with accrual, you might be saying, listen, I'm gonna marry out of community of property, but with accrual. Just make sure you come to us, we evaluate how much wealth, what's your wealth all over global. I mean, we're talking global, future global citizens here. So you might have invested in UK with Andrew. So you need to come to us and we'll say, okay, this is your value before you get married. Please include that within the antenuptial contract. And of course, within that also, you might choose to create what we call separate statement. Separate statement meaning that you don't want to disclose within antenuptial contract, because that type of contract is a public document. It gets submitted at the deeds office. So you might want to actually look into separating the two, and then you create what you call separate document. We put it aside. So earlier on, I spoke about issue of succession. Guys, a family succession is the most important thing. And it's funny enough, I looked at one of the established banks where they were talking about how they're struggling with the internal succession on their leadership on the board. And I brought it home. I spoke to some of the property investors to say, guys, succession is a key thing. What makes succession so complicated even within us? Because succession is not carried properly. It can affect your wealth. And it speaks to the preservation concept or principle that I spoke about earlier, right? If, for instance, within that succession, you don't even have a will, because a will is one of the tools that you can actually utilize. And I spoke earlier, if you recall, when I was speaking about the indicators, that you might find yourself having your wealth being administered under what we call interstate succession. So interstate succession basically is an act that is out there Cool. I'm not sure if anyone can hear me, but if you can hear me, I'll continue because I seems to have had technical issues. I'm not sure what I have. My screen just went blank. Oh, perfect. Oh, Nico, thank you so much. Yeah, the screen just went blank. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure what happened. I didn't touch anything. Cool. Now let's get the ball rolling. I was still speaking about the family feuds. I was still speaking about not caring for your dependents. And that precisely might be the issue, that you did not plan your succession planning properly. And this speaks to having a proper investment structures supported by other tools like having a valid wills in place, guys. And also issues of having life policies. How do you nominate who the beneficiaries are? That is part and parcel of succession planning that we're speaking about there. And it has to do with asset protection. You're working hard so much so and in creating, guys. Now, when it comes to personal liability, we're talking about how do we actually protect this investment from each other, for instance. And Bruno likes speaking about this. For instance, how you might be involved in development, for that matter, property development. We all know the risk component that comes with being a property development. Also, you might be involved in a multi-let, right? And or Airbnb. So the risk nature of this investment normally differs. There are those kind of inherent risks that can come with the property development, and there are those inherent risks that you'll find typical in Airbnb. It might be compliance issues, and then in multi-let, it might be the issue of family fighting. I mean, you've got multiple people, strangers renting from you. So would you then consolidate all these property investment in one sort of an entity, whether being a trust or a company for that matter? So would you be doing that? So I don't think so, because now there are those inherent risks that should they go wrong, something goes wrong, you might find yourself in a trouble. So, okay. So I think Bruno is back on, and I'm gonna try to bring him. Bruno, can you hear me? Perfect. Okay, I see that he's trying to come in. Yeah, Bruno, do you want to come in, please? Because you've got a control over the slides, please. Bruno?
Sorry, there we go. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, please.
Excellent. What slide are you on?
I'm still on that asset protection, the initial one. Then you can control the slide from here, because I don't have a control over the slide.
So I just want to apologize to everyone. I don't know. Unfortunately, the device that I normally use for meetings it seems to be giving me a little bit of trouble. So I do apologize. So I'm going to carry on. It was saying that there was an overheating problem, but I mean, we're going to get by that. So I'm not too worried. Did you? All right, great. So let's maybe carry on.
Sorry, I pretty much covered the slide, so you can start from here.
Okay, great.
Sure.
So Shilly Boy would have touched on the marital regime. He would have touched on succession. I know that that's something that he actually puts a lot of weight on. It's a very, very, very important it's a very important consideration to have. So the next thing, the other reason why asset protection is so very important, and another factor that you guys need to consider, is basically, and this is more now on the business side of things, because I mean, up until now, we've spoken about your personal need for asset protection. I mean, your spouse, exposure of your spouse, how to deal with succession. So now we're looking at the business side and we're going, great, but why else would we have asset protection? And here I normally divide it into three different facets. Three reasons, basically, from a business perspective, why asset protection makes sense. So the first one is that you want to protect yourself, or rather, you want to protect yourself from your business. Now, remember, your business is running certain trades, is getting into contracts with people, is incurring liabilities, it's taking risk. I mean, let's look at examples. You get into a development, you pay contractors in this development, and something happens, or you've got a business partner in your business. And if you don't ring fence your business away from yourself, You're going to expose yourself. If you do all of these things in your own personal name, one thing goes wrong, and all the businesses that you have in your personal name are exposed. So that's facet one. You need to protect yourself from your business. But the reality is facet two. You need to protect your business from yourself, because the reality is no one is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Things happen in your personal life that you can't ring fence. So the last thing you want is these things being translated into risk for your business. So take, for example, car accidents when you're the driver of the car. You can't hide behind anything there. You're the responsible party. Now, you don't want your businesses now responsible for that as well. So you want to ring fence them. Anything. There's so many different forms. Divorces, even divorces, when it comes down to it, it's a personal thing. You do want to ring fence your businesses so that the divorce doesn't directly impact. I'm not speaking about the separation of the estate in the divorce. I mean, that's a story on its own, but you don't want the business to be hampered. You want the business to continue functioning even whilst you're going through a divorce. So you need to ring fence the way from your private estate. And the last one, and that a lot of people don't give a lot of thought to, is you want to protect your businesses from each other. You don't want to mix things up and have everything under your personal name, or even everything under one company that carries different risk levels. So for example, when you have this development that's risky and you've got a business partner, you don't want to mix this up with your very conservative, single let property in the suburbs. It's two very different styles of investment. So be careful with that. You'd want to be able to separate and put certain properties in one place, certain properties or businesses in another place, and keep these separate from each other to protect them from each other. And then an example I normally use here, especially in the asset protection game, is just buckets of water. So imagine yourself as one central bucket in the middle. Right? Now, this bucket is full, and all this water represents your estate and everything in your estate. Now, if something goes wrong and somebody comes over and wants to kick the bucket, everything's gone, right? You're risking. People will come with their cups and try to fill up their cups out of your water, and it's all coming out of one place. So what you want to do is you want to be able to create separate buckets. And each bucket would carry their own amount of water from the central bucket. And the goal, when it comes to asset protection, is to have nothing in that main bucket and everything separated around you in these individual buckets that work as a network with each other. And ultimately, you get what you need from them without necessarily having to fill up your own bucket. I hope that analogy kind of makes sense. It's sometimes something I spend a bit of time on, but I think there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that we still need to discuss. So let's move on with that. So that's asset protection 101. All right, now, the second principle that I was referring to was financing optimization. So very quick on financing optimization. I don't proclaim to be a financing specialist. I mean, the best people to speak to are your bond originators like Christian Janssen and Miguel Martins from APSA. So I mean, the banks and TUF, for example, depending on what type of deal you're working on. TUF has some great ways of looking at properties. They've got different criteria that they look at. But one thing that we've come to realize through our conversations with all these financial institutions is that structure is paramount. TUF, for example, will not lend unless you're running your business through a company. And after our conversations with them over recent weeks, we've seen that they actually agree with the perspective of people having the proper structures in place, because they also want from their side protection in that respect. The banks, very similar thing. The banks will look at your affordability in your personal name if you come to them in your personal name asking for a bond. The problem is, once you buy your first house, now this is a tick against your name because now you've got a loan. Buy your second property, now it's another one. Next thing you know, the problem is that the banks will look at you, look at your name and see that you've got two loans against your name and will say, sorry, you're over indebted. You've got too many loans. And even though you're getting rental income, that does not mean that the banks are going to be willing to say, well, oh, he's getting rental income, the loans are covered, we're happy. So even the banks acknowledge that ideally you'd actually want to do it in a company because that shows that you're a business And because you're a business, do it in the company. And they'll be able to actually look at the company's affordability. And if they feel that the company does not have affordability, they'll look at yours, but simply to sign as a surety, not to give you the loan, which means that that loan will not go against your name. You'll only sign a surety on behalf of the company. So the company is still the borrower. You just kind of give security. But anytime we look at your name, in your personal name, you don't actually have a loan, which means that you're good for it. Your company is the one that's actually incurred the debt. So things like that are important to think about. Track record, building up a track record over a couple of years where you've got a proper property business and you're getting a good amount of income. That's vital, because that's what banks will look at, because they'll want to look at your financial statements and your balance sheet, and they want to give money. They just need to know that you're good for it. And if you've got good income in your company, why wouldn't they give you money? So that's kind of what you want to build up from a financing optimization perspective. And this is why, and to wrap up before Shilly Boy now comes in, this is why we start playing around with trusts and companies. So from my side, if I have to just look at it from an asset protection financing optimization, what structures would I advise? Asset protection for me, I see that the trust is vital, because unlike a company where a person is a shareholder, a trust does not have shareholding. And that means that no one can come after a shareholder of a trust, because that doesn't exist. The trust has all the assets on its own. The only way somebody can come after the trust is if the trust incurs debt, or the trust wants to vest something in one of the beneficiaries. But short of that, the trust owns these assets, which basically means from an asset protection perspective, there's no risk there that the assets that you've given to the trust are going to get attached. Unlike a company where you're still the shareholder, meaning that if you give R1 million property to the company and you're 100% shareholder, your shares are worth R1 million. And when you pass away, it's still going to form part of your estate. When a creditor comes knocking, they're going to see shares worth R1 million. So trust for me underpins the structure. And then from there, we can start having these conversations about, should we use the trust directly or should we go into a company? I like my companies from a corporate perspective. I know from a financing perspective, it makes sense. But this is where Shilly Boy is going to come in, and he's going to start speaking about the tax efficiency side. And this is where you guys are going to start clicking on why the balance between trust and company is so important. Shilly Boy, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Bruno. Yes, let's go on, guys. I hope everyone was able to grab a cup of coffee when we had a technical issues and you are ready to rock and roll. I see that we might be running out of time, so I'm going to try to be a bit fast in the coming slides so that we are able to touch on other couple of things. Guys, here's the thing about him preferring the trust, and I concur. But why? I think from tax point of view, let's look at this way. For instance, I'll give an example. For someone who owns shares in that particular company, those shares will be a property as defined upon your death, right? Now, we know that because also of global inequality and South Africa being one of the what you call countries with high inequality, there's typically what we call wealth taxes. And wealth taxes, even though it's not coded, but then is coded in principles of having different types of wealth taxes. And one of them that we found is what we call an estate transfer duty. Those are the types of wealth taxes. So now when you die, when you passes away, everything that you own that belongs to you in your personal name get constituted or collected together and becomes what you call deceased estates. As such, through application of an Estate Duty Act, certain tax, an estate duty tax gets to be paid. We know from anything above 3.5 up to 30 million, you pay 20%, and beyond that is about 25%. So pretty much you're gone. The wealth around 25% average, it's gone, just by virtue of you having things in your personal name at the date of your death. Now, with that also, it comes what we call capital gain tax, because within the provision of disposal or the definition of disposal, there's what we call deemed disposal provisions. So a death is one of them that kicks in what we'll call as a deemed disposal. So basically, the act says you have sold by virtue of you dying, right? So you'll be subjected to capital, especially on investment properties that you would be creating in this journey. So effectively up to 18%, so already I'm sitting about 38% for someone at the high end. Remember, this thing can apply from low end to about high end. But for someone like you here sitting here, you're pretty much probably going to be at the high end because you're here, you're seriously going to create wealth. So already 38% of your wealth. I haven't even spoken about the issue of family feuds that we know somehow have a way of reducing your wealth because you end up selling at distress. And this is why we always say, as property investor, you can flip the script and actually end up taking advantage of what's going on. Someone is playing with slides. I can't see the slides. Okay, I can only see myself now. Okay, I'll continue speaking until whoever it's doing the IT is fixing what I'm seeing here. So what I was talking about is the whole notion of what happens when you die, right? So already we've got a high level of taxes, the capital gain, and then we've got the estate duty, right? Now, picture this scenario, guys, and I think this is why I said let's flip the script. Flipping the script in a sense that you as a property investor, you can end up actually going out there and look for disease estate, because this is where in most cases you get what you call motivated sellers. Why do I say you get motivated sellers? It's in a sense that when you're administering disease estates, there are time periods, and the disease estates need to be reported within specific period. Taxes needs to be paid within specific period. So now when you've got a disease estate that is not liquid, in most cases, the administrators of this wealth will then do what? Have to dispose some of these properties. And this is where when you are a client of Intergen, we speak about making sure that your estate is liquid, because you don't want to compromise your family, where upon your death, actually, we end up selling at the distressed prices. So some of these costs here, if you still have a bond on your properties, there are bond cancellation fees, there's executors, and for those guys who administer estate, 4% of it, it's a statutory rate. And by the time your death already, if you add that 4% to 38%, that's about 42%. So this is from me. From tax point of view, like I was saying, I'm agreeing to Bruno why he was saying rather separate the ownership and the benefits of wealth, because trust is one of the tools that you can actually use to separate where the wealth is owned by the trust, but then you're still enjoying the benefits of the trust as a result of being a beneficiary of a trust. The next slide, Bruno. Thank you. This is one of the slides I love. Now, there's a principle, and that we call conduit pipe principle. Now, listen carefully, and you might this. So what basically we're saying is that what comes in, you're making money from a property, and the money flows right into trust, and it goes to beneficiaries in the same year. The people that are going to be are the beneficiaries. You got that, right? Now, but that's not what this current slide is showing me, right? You'll agree with me. Now, we've got a current typical aspiring investor will typically have properties in their name. I always get it wrong when this is Prince Harry and Meghan. But yeah, today I got it right, Bruno. So now what happens is that you've got your Prince Harry and Prince Meghan here owning couple of properties in their personal name, investment properties, posting on social medias. Here we just signed a few things. But the reality is that before you can actually give your kids the soft life that you want to give, in most cases, you will have to pay SARS, right? You'll have to pay SARS, and then after that, you then have to what you call pay for moral activities for your children. But let's flip the screen, the script, and do exactly what I said earlier, where we have to do is say, instead of the money going to Prince Harry and Prince Dimagaj for that Princess Dimagaj, let's rather then flip this thing and take these rental incomes, move them to SPV, what we call a special purpose vehicle. It doesn't matter. A property trust can be that matter. So then the wealth sits in there, but we use what you call mainly because in your case it might be because you use wealth, you want to live off it, right? And you are soft distribute to them using the pie that I explained earlier, which means that the kids are the ones that are going to the trust fund babies, right? They will have tax numbers. They will be subjected to submitting tax returns. But we know that maybe the kids are not social where they're already generating fees, right? So which are not any income, and then they are at the lower tax brackets of SARS tax rates, right? Which means that they'll be taxed at the lower rate. They might actually not be taxed because we know that a natural person, you and I, are entitled to what we call a tax threshold, about 87,000 currently, roughly. So anything below that, you don't get taxed, you get exempted for tax. So imagine if you've got 3 kids, then you're able to distribute about closer to 300,000. That's pretty much it as compared to if it had went to you and supposed to pay SARS first. Can you see that already efficiently you saved how much? You might have saved about 40% of whatever you are making. And that applies when you want to distribute to live off. But for that matter, if you want to do what we call compound reinvestment, where you say, Shileboy, I don't want to give my kids money, or I want to strike both balance. We've got a way where we then distribute this money back into the company, and we can do something along those lines, where then the company are the ones that get taxed at the lower rate, which is about 28%, and looking forward to 27%, as announced last day, that companies will be taxed at 27% from next year. Hopefully that matters. It was announced during the budget speech. Bruno, the next slide. Is Bruno with us? So basically, that's what we're talking about, tax efficiency. As much as you're going to do tax efficiency, guys, you also don't want to compromise financing efficiency, right? Because I'll give you an example. You might be putting some of the properties at the trust level, right? And then compromising the company without a track record of its own independent, track record and some sort of a profit and capital reserves. Because some banks, when they invest, especially the likes of TAM, they look at the balance sheet from that angle. You also want to make sure, as much as you're planning and you're doing distribution model within the trust, you don't compromise the financing efficiency that earlier on Bruno spoke about. So you don't want to do extreme tax planning and also asset protection and end up compromising. That's why we always say these 3 principles is a guiding principle that you always try as you go along creating this work to try to come point of equilibrium, where all these principles cannot be satisfied, because you can never really satisfy all of them 100%, but you always try to find yourself in a and if you recall earlier on, Andrew also said it, that structures can never be utilized the same way. You and I might have a similar structure, but can never be, because our variables, our dynamics, our indicators differs from one person to the next. You might be having 5 kids. Well, maybe I've got 1 kid, or I don't even have a kid. So can you see the usage of such investment structures will differ? Bruno? Cool. Now, this is what, and I think this is where also I'll bring Bruno in to just have a conversation. Guys, this is what we typically see in practice, but does not mean you need to go out there. And I think this is what you need to take out of this. Does not mean you need to go out there and structure this. And now, let me play around this. Earlier on, I spoke about, during the indicator, someone who might be having various business, whether you're engineering, you are in medical. I've got clients where I find that they're in the medical space and things like that. you might want to ring-fence such kind of interest in what you call shared trust, right? Where you don't mix them with property trust, because you feel that the inherent risk that comes with the nature of the business that you are in is totally different to a property risk, inherent risk that comes with investing in property. And one of the safeguards measures that you can put is to ring-fence the whole structures. Now, earlier on during the indicators, we also spoke about where you find that your partner is incapacitated. Now, you might find a partner that is incapacitated. What happens if you die and your partner can't take care of themselves? This is where things like special trust comes in. Fine, let's leave the incapacitated partner. What happens if you've got minor children? Are you going to leave their well-being under the guardianship? Are you going to leave their well-being under people that your family members that might actually compromise the well-being of your kids after having worked out? This is where special trust things comes in to say, this is the wealth of my kids that I'm creating. Should anything goes wrong, I'm ring-fencing. So it must be specific, because even how it gets taxed is separate. For disability trust, which is special trust, get taxed differently compared to a normal trust. And then also those trusts where there's a minor beneficiary also get taxed differently. So your indicators will dictate on how we actually constitute a special trust. SPV basically just a special purpose vehicle trust. You might find scenario where you are entering in some sort of a venture with other people, and you might want to just ring-fence it in. The dynamics and indicators dictate on how do we actually safeguard potential risk that comes as a result of these indicators. But all in all, you might want to make the whole family trust sort of the main umbrella of this. And all of these, by the way, can be a beneficiary of each other. But then that goes with making sure that your tax trust administrators are actually solid and sober and understand what they're doing, because then the record keeping that comes with this, it actually being more extreme. But a family trust, people are always say, but Shilipo, what should I be putting? And I'll throw you an example. You might take a life policy right now to say, I'm taking this life policy. Should I die, my kids should actually inherit these type of benefits, right? But who's going to take care of that wealth, right? Who's going to take that? So are you leaving that in the hands of someone else? I mean, let's say you pass on and you've got minor children. Who's going to administer that payout? So in most cases, you want to make a family trust a beneficiary of your life policy, because by that time, you're already even knowing who are your trustees. You appointed Intergen, for that matter, to be an independent trustee. You already trusted their system. You understand that should I pass on, my kids will be catered for. And also it helps with making sure that the deceased estate is lucrative in such a way that should you have that primary reason that you just left it in your personal name, then you don't even have to sell it in a distressed price, because you can actually pay certain expenses using the payout that is coming from the life policy. Can you see how then we make sure that your property wealth, it's lucrative and is actually preserved from one generation to the next? I think Bruno is just going to show you some of the fancy companies then that comes below that, for those who then say, let's build a track record. Let's make sure that as much as we created these beautiful structures, but underneath this, we've got multiple companies that, I mean, I'm talking about guys who might be doing Airbnb, who might be doing development with how one of our partners here, Howard Matthew, said. So these are the things that you might typically, but guys, start small. Does not mean you must come to Shiliboy and say, Shiliboy, I want the whole structure. And please underline that. You might need to do is to come to us and say, I've got these indicators. This is my scenario. Then we'll then best and say, this is what scenario. And one of the fundamental things that I always encourage you guys to look into is that you must revisit your structures every year, because your material events actually changes on a daily basis. Life happens every day. So is your investment structure needs to be revisited on an annual basis, at least, so that you make sure that it's still relevant, right? And I think that's fundamentally important, what you guys need to take out of this. The next slide, Bruno. Next slide, Bruno. I think that the next slide, I'm not sure. It seems like Bruno. There we go. Cool. I think the next slide, Bruno, I'm not sure if you want to go and take it out from here. We're talking about a scenario where this particular investor is unprotected. You might be that particular investor who's sitting with properties in their personal name. And this is what we're going to. Bruno, you want to take this from here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Excellent. Sorry, I wasn't on. So just very, very briefly on the previous slide, and just a couple of things that I wanted to mention that are really, really cool. So Shiliboy obviously mentioned that these aren't structures that each and every person has to have. These are alternatives. They're different options, different variations that we found most common when exploring different property investors and advising them. But what's really, so just bear in mind, so what we were chatting about before, just from the asset protection perspective, if you look at the property trust and the SPV trust, this is where the asset protection basically and the tax beneficial, the tax optimization or tax efficiency starts coming in, especially so conduit principle. So if you look at the SPV trust, this is the example where the income actually comes directly from the property into the trust that you can distribute. And if you look at the property trust that has the holding company, the one thing sometimes people ask me, and I found this on occasion, is why the holding company? Because we've had the conversation about either holding the property directly in the trust or using companies and having the shareholding of those companies held in the trust. So if you look at the property trust example, so this is the fourth one, the one right at the end. This holdco, what's it doing here? Why? We didn't say much about it. So it's just an interesting structure that we typically work with. I'm basically, what we're going to say is that it's not utterly necessary, but the reason why it's there again is twofold. And so from an asset protection perspective, this allows you to have multiple trading companies doing multiple things being held by one corporate company. And from a tax perspective, Shiribu, I don't know if you want to jump back in on this, if you do, but from a tax perspective, it's also really great because when those trading companies declare dividends, there's a roll up of dividends into the holding company, which means that even though they declare dividends into the holding company, you don't actually have to pay that dividend tax just yet because it's basically rolled over. And that holding company, if that company doesn't declare dividends, it can actually make out loans back into other trading companies. So basically, this means that you start moving money within these trading companies and holding companies without this actually being declared income. So you don't take it into the trust, you keep it within your corporate structure. So it's just a really cool principle out of that, and that starts coming to the point where if the investor starts getting advanced and building up multiple businesses, it's a really cool nice to have. And because companies aren't all that expensive, we typically suggest, you know what, it's not a bad idea to give it a shot and set something like that up from the beginning. But Shilipo, I don't know if you want to add to that.
I mean, you said mouthful, and I think one of the things that I always love this type of nature of structure is how you can actually move money, like what you just said. Dividends is one of them, and where you just do a rollover. Donation is one of them, where you can, if you want to donate to this company, you can actually donate because it's within group companies, and you're exempt from donation tax, and you can easily kickstart this business. So there's quite a lot of tax planning that can be done within the group companies. But yeah, you said mouthful, Bruno.
Cool. So let's go on to the next one. So here we start speaking about the unprotected investor. This is so I'll start it off, and then Shilly Boy will actually run you through some of the numbers. And so when we're referring to unprotected investor, like you mentioned, this is typically the person that didn't know. And again, not to anyone's fault, the market, the education or the information wasn't as apparent as it is now. So some people for a couple of years just went out, they bought properties, they took action, and that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there are scenarios where now we need to come back and say, well, how do we fix it? What do we do for this person? And I always advise we have to break it up into two different phases. Guys, please. we're not here to scare people to a point where it's like, oh no, I've got all this that I need to sort out. Let me put my investment journey on hold and try fix it. Carry on with your investment journey. One should not impact the other. And we break it up into two phases because of this. Phase one is get the structure done, right? Whatever your structure might be, let's get it done so that moving forward, you're good to go. Then as phase two, concurrently, while you're moving forward, we try sort out the historic things when we need to. And we say, you know, and the reason why we do this, and you'll see from Shilly Boy's example, is there's a time component to this. Sometimes by dividing something up over a period of time, you can make better use of certain tax exemptions or tax rebates. So we try to structure it over a period of time, saying within the next, whatever, 5 to 10 year plan, we start moving these properties across. There's always an expense to it, sure, but the more strategic we do it, the more cost saving there are. For some people, it's actually best to do it all at once, like pull that band-aid off because there's a need for it, especially if the banks start finding that you're over indebted. For other people, do a couple now, a couple later. Sometimes even refinance properties. But Shilly Boy will actually speak about the equity component. And from Leon's conversation on blueprints, you'll see how this all ties in. And this is where the beauty behind it is and where we work so well within this ecosystem. So I think I'll just run the example, then Shilly Boy will run the numbers. So this was actually a real life scenario. We just changed the names, obviously. Just to kind of run people by a typical scenario where we've got a situation where a man is married to a woman and they own, each one of them owns properties, and together they own one property. They've done this all in their personal name. So all personal, him alone, wife alone, and then we've got a joint property there at the bottom. So with this particular recommendation, you've got a compounding-based strategy, a distribution-based strategy. Now, Shilly Boy touched on this earlier on. So a compounding-based strategy is where you want to keep the income in a specific vehicle and let it grow so you can buy more and more properties. And a distribution-based strategy is where you actually want to use these property, the money, the income on a monthly basis. And each one of these would differ. So Shilly Boy, do you want to maybe jump in here and have a look?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm just trying to protect the bandwidth.
Sure.
Cool. Bruno already explained, and I also explained, guys, about compound-based strategy and distribution-based strategy. So now the next slides I'm gonna rush through because I'm looking at the time. But then I think the fundamental principle that you guys need to take out of this is where this person is actually can make money by moving this property, realizing the equity component of it, and then also the timing of moving this property so that we take advantage of what you call annual exclusion that is applicable to a natural person upon disposing of a property. Bruno, do you wanna move the next slide? Okay, like Bruno said, this is a live scenario. If you look at these individuals, him, the wife own a couple of properties. He has about 4 properties, and the wife has 1 property, and then they jointly have 1 property, right? Now, there's equity, and I think this is where the likes of property coaches like Andrews will explain it to you guys. But then we've got a property, equity component here. You might be sitting on equity and say, but how do I leverage? How do I get this equity to ensure that I actually can escalate and actually make more money? But the reality of the fact of the matter, here's a scenario already. Tax hack number 1, guys, write it up. Now, you've got a scenario here, funny enough, where these couples, they're married in community of property, which means that this wealth actually belongs to them, right? Now, the funny part here is that if they had these 6 properties, by the way, these properties, they bought them. Okay, let's maybe remove the primary residence. Let's work on 5, right? These properties, they bought them as brand new properties under development, like they off plan and they bought with, which means that they qualify for Section 13(6). But the unfortunate part, because they did a poor tax planning, this one had it on his personal name, then the wife on a personal name, and then the other one is a joint venture. Of course, it's not applicable because it's a primary home, right? So they can't qualify for Section 13(6) because this one owns only 4 properties, which we know that the requirement is that you should be owning about 5. Can you see that this is just so, like, I don't know what to say. If I was a teacher, I mean, I can't encourage corporal punishment, but I would have done something else. You know what I mean? Because you could have easily have took advantage of just Section 13(6), and that could have actually maximized their return. But either way, so we're going to help them that they don't repeat this mistake going forward. So now, what they decided during the blueprint with Leon and other coaches, they'll dispose or sell other properties or retain other properties. You will see in the next scenario, say, okay, fine. The potential capital gain will be calculated, of course, and then the timing of disposing that so that the capital gain tax consequences are actually reduced. But one of the things that also, again, I want you to write it down is, most of you guys, when you do what you call incur certain costs beyond acquiring the property, you don't actually keep record. And as a result, you end up understating your base cost. And you'll ask me, what is this base cost? Why is it so important? And a base cost, basically, you'll see in the later on slides. I'm explaining these concepts so that I don't have to go through them in the next slide. So now, base cost is basically what a cost component balance that we take into account when you dispose a property. We'll take what you call proceed and minus the base cost. So it's made up of various things. It's made up of transfer duties, if it's applicable when you bought that property. It's made up of the original acquisition cost. It's made up of legal fees. It's made up of issues of improvement. Most of you guys don't keep such kind of records. And of course, even when you come to Shileboy and you want to assess the capital gain point of view, that cost also can be capitalized into the base cost. But how many of you guys actually bear that in mind? So this is one of the things that I feel that most people don't actually do. But please, guys, keep record so that you don't pay tax unnecessarily. Bruno, next slide. And I think this is the slides that I already explained on how do we calculate capital gain. You'll see that what we then do is say market value, because you'll be disposing probably at market value. I mean, as long as you're not distressed, but we're hoping that when you're buying the property, of course, Andrew will say don't buy it above market value for that matter. So meaning that you'll buy below market value. But in this case, you want to sell it at market value or even beyond market value, right? Now you'll minus the base cost and gives you what you call capital gain. But like I said, keep records, guys. This is one of the things that you need to bear in mind. What is this base cost? So maybe one of the lectures we need to talk about is teach people base cost. Andrew, what do you think? You'll tell me what you think. But we need to look into what makes up this base cost and teach our guys so that they can actually start keeping their records in a more efficient. Maybe we need to have a chat about that, Andrew. The next slide, Bruno. Now, here's a scenario. This out of this slide that you guys need to take is the timing. Why I'm saying this timing? Each natural person, when they dispose a property, they are allowed to what we call an annual exclusion of a capital gain of about 40,000, right? So here, this balance here. Can you see that if you wanted to dispose your properties, you come to Shileboy in Jan or in December, and you say, listen, I want to dispose this property maybe in a year. Let's say you come in Jan of this year, and you say, listen, Shileboy, I want to dispose these 4 properties, and this is basically the potential capital gain. Shileboy will help you to determine this. You are seeing here, you say, okay, fine. If we're to dispose these 4 properties before end of Feb of 2021, forget the years here. We're in 2021, so it's going to be much easier if I speak in terms of 2021, right? Now, if you come to me and say, Shileboy, I want to dispose these 4 properties in 2021, end of Feb, then Shilipo says, okay, cool. Now, we can actually take advantage of these 40,000. But if had we sold all of them before the end of Feb, which means we'll only be subjected to 40,000. But because now we sell one in March, we're also allowed 40,000. Can you see, just simple thing like that? But you wouldn't know if you just went and just sold properties at once, and I'll say it's an emotional disposal. So you want to make sure that that is also safeguarded, right? And you're pretty much saves the loss and a lot. And then we also mixed what you call we plan between the ones with high losses and the one with higher capital gains, so that we reduce the balance that is going to be subjected to capital gain. So I think that's the principle that you guys need to take. The timing is important on when you dispose your properties. Next slide, Bruno. Okay. And when he's still trying to move the slides, one of the things that I need to advise with is that also upon a death, I know it's not relevant for you guys, is that there's also this annual exclusion. It goes to about 300,000. So those are some of the benefits that tends to be applicable, especially if you've got that primary residence upon your death and you already utilized that 2 million primary residence exclusion. So you might find also being allowed that extra 300,000, but it's not less to know, so that you can advise your in such scenarios. Bruno, you want to move to the next slide? I'm not sure if someone can give me the powers to. I'm losing Bruno. Oh, there we go. So basically, I think in this scenario, I'm going to show you guys some of the principle, or politically the principle that we discussed in the previous slides. You want to show me all of them, Bruno? So basically, what you have seen is that those people did not take advantage of Section 136, and by virtue of them now moving all of this in one structure, and by then what I said earlier on, the risk profile are similar. The inherent risk of these particular property investors are similar. So which means that they can take advantage of Section 136 on their new property investment going forward. I spoke about primary residence exclusion will be applicable to them if they retain that particular primary residence in their personal name. You might want to ask, how did we move their properties? There's what you call an advanced Section 42 transfer, but I don't want to make you guys. It's another thing that we use, and then we're able to roll over capital gain, and also we're able to roll over the transfer duties. Base cost, guys, please keep records. That's very important, right? Then again, obviously, primary rebates, that's what is applicable to a natural person that we obviously took advantage of. And of course, transfer duties, we look into that if the property is actually at what price. That's very important. We know that in a billion, it's what you call, it's subjected to transfer duty. But we also obviously take it out, and this is where that conveyancing, Bruno Simal conveyancing department comes in to say, we'll actually using municipal value pass the test of SARS. And of course, that's a conveyancing kind of a thing where they are able to pass it over. And then you may find that the municipal value actually differs with what the sales agent will typically say is the market value of that property. But it's a gray area. It's a case by case scenario. So you don't want to just fix it as if you can always transfer it at the municipal value. So don't think that's the case. And yeah, and then the capital gain tax, guys, like I said, is the issue of taking advantage of those annual exclusion and making sure that your base costs are up to date. Please make sure. And at the end of the day, the main one is the timing. At what point do you sell? That's very important, guys. Next slide, Bruno. I think the next slide will be what we call inefficient investor. Now, let's say aspiring investor, you came, we spoke, right? And we even subsequently went and say, okay, Prince Harry, now what we're doing now is we moved your properties, we took advantage of all those things, and we make sure that we got those records first, and then now we do the structure, and you become inefficient, which means that you don't keep your records. Now, I'll go take you guys through some of the indicators. What do we mean when we say there's an inefficient investor? This is an investor that might have not used Intergen, definitely didn't use Intergen, because if they had used Intergen, I wouldn't even have agreed to this. Now, this is what typically, for those who are that we all do what we call onboarding, and we make sure that this is what is happening. Liner like that, guys, I tend to where during the onboarding I say, listen, so I know you're excited, now you are ready, you're rock and roll, we gave you what you have authorities, you are ready to rock and roll, you told everyone that you've got a trust. But hang on, step back. Basics first. Basics first, I want to during these indicators, guys, you've got a bank account, right? We need to make sure that you've got that tax number. But this investor, funny enough, didn't have. I'm wondering who's doing the trust administration. This is a reality, guys, that we see people coming to us, but because they actually did not follow the things. So the typical who will have a trust will say, Shile, I don't think my trust needs a bank account. This is what happened. I don't keep records keeping, guys. I don't even have financial statements. One of the things that we always do say, do you even understand what financial statement means to you? Do you even know the loan to value of your financial statement holistically? Anyway, so the tax number, do you know that? And I always tell this inefficient investor, say, do you know that by virtue of a trust not having tax number, you can go to jail up to 2 years? Do you know that if that trust is actually making money, you can even get yourself in a trouble where you've got about 20% of what you call 200% penalties in a what you call as a result of you not submitting things. You are not submitting tax returns, right? You don't even have an independent trustee. This is where asset protection comes in. There are court cases where, funny in one, this funny scenario is one of the cases. This gentleman, he had his brother as what do you call an independent trustee, but funny enough is that he did not even consult with us and when he went about the affairs of the trust, right? He even used the trust as a what you call as the assets of the trust as part of him applying for his personal credit card. But we've got scenarios like that. But these indicators, you've got them. What are the risks that comes with this, right? And how do you go about doing an asset protection of that? Because that's very, this can have a legal ramification where you get sued, and this is where Bruno comes in and can end up having a tax implication, and this is where you'll find yourself in jail or having 200% penalties and interest. We don't want to find yourself. That's going to the ecosystem under square feet and sub, and so fix you. Bruno, do you want to look at the risk side of things so that we don't find these people having what you call we don't find these people having what you call alter ego trust? And Bruno will explain what is this alter ego trust, because you've got these indicators, you might find yourself actually having what you call alter ego trust, and I don't want you having that trust, especially belonging to ecosystem of Sapen. Bruno. Okay, it seems like Bruno is still waiting to be let in. Whoever is controlling the slide, you want to move to the next slide, please?
I think I mean, it's
okay. Cool. All right.
Cool. So alter ego, very, very interesting concept. So as Shilibo briefly explained the history of trusts and basically why they're there, why they exist. And I explained it earlier from an asset protection perspective. So the one thing that we need to remember is let's forget about the way that we're trying to utilize trust for investments, right? And let's just look at the very, very basics on why trusts actually came to be. Why are they in existence? What's their purpose? Now, there was a specific time where people thought, you know what, if something happens to me, I want the trust to be handed over to something. It needs to sit somewhere else in order to benefit the people that I wanted to benefit. So I would donate certain things into the structure that's called a trust. I would name a bunch of beneficiaries. And the whole idea was, I want them to benefit from this asset. And if I pass away, you know what? They're good. They're going to keep benefiting from this asset. That was the whole concept behind it, right? So what one now needs to actually notice, and what I need to emphasize in what I just said, is you hand over full control. You hand over full control to the trust. The trust is owner. Simple as that. And because the trust is owner, it means that you cannot actually make decisions. This trust, you're not the puppet master. You cannot do whatever you want and simply use the trust in order to do it. And that's the kind of thing that we need to remember. With a company, it's different. With a company, you can be the shareholder of the company, you can be the director of the company, and your only job is to make profits, give it to the shareholders, everyone's happy. Trusts are different. Trusts are there purely for the benefit of the beneficiaries. And that's why the courts are quite strict on trust. SARS is quite strict on trust because people use it as their personal piggy bank, and that is not the purpose of a trust. When you establish a trust, you choose a certain amount of beneficiaries. Those beneficiaries you need to take care of properly. An alter ego trust is effectively when you do not do this. When you create a trust, it's a valid trust. It's been properly registered. Everything is perfect about the trust. The trust deed is glorious. Intergen can give you this trust deed. The problem is in the administration of the trust. If you don't have the right independent trustee and you run this like a piggy bank, the courts might consider this to be an alter ego trust. Now, what does this mean for you? So there's different concepts here. So what does it mean to pierce the corporate veil? So the courts would look at this trust and go, hold on, wait, we don't buy this for a second. We think that, and that's what Shilly Boy is mentioning. Bad record keeping, you don't have a separate bank account, you use this money for whatever you want to use it for, no real separation between yourself and the trust. The courts will consider this to be an alter ego trust. And being an alter ego trust, they will pierce that veil. And what it means to pierce the veil is they'll disregard the existence of the trust, and they'll consider all these assets, all this income to belong to you. And this trust won't actually have any application or won't have any place in this. And this is what happens when you use the term pierce the corporate veil. So examples of this typically happen, and it happens a lot in marriages, because people will get married in out of community of property with accrual, and then they would then decide after the marriage to start transferring assets out of their estate or buying new assets within these companies away from the spouse, so the spouse doesn't benefit at all, which goes against the very principle of accrual. And things like this, the court will look at and go, well, we don't believe it. We don't, like if the trust was in existence prior to your marriage and it grew from strength to strength, different story. Is its own entity and has its own beneficiaries. But if the courts, for example, can identify that you almost intentionally move these assets into a trust because you didn't want them to form part of their estate, the court may disregard the trust and still consider those assets in the divorce proceedings. There's cases where banks, with the signature of suretyships and loan agreements, have done the same thing. And SARS has implemented plenty of anti-avoidance measures, which Shilly Boy will actually speak on shortly, where they saw this risk and said, no, that's no way we're going to allow this to happen. And that there's actual legislation that identifies when a certain benefit will vest in the trust and when the founder, for example, will be expected to pay tax, simply because they did it in order to avoid the payment of tax. So Shilly Boy, if you just want to touch on those points very quickly.
Yes, thank you so much, Bruno. I think in the interest of time, guys, here's the thing. If you don't do a proper trust administration, as the founder, you will potentially find yourself in a difficult position with SARS, right? And this is where we are saying instead of the beneficiary being the ones being taxed, you will find yourself being the one taxed. And we know you're high net worth individuals. So which means that should that income, that particular income being what you call attributed to you, then you will find yourself paying high tax unnecessarily. And on top of that, that comes with penalties and interest. So the fundamental or the principle of this is that make sure that your trust administration is solid. Make sure that you've got a solid record keeping. And that can easily be done if you do things properly, right? And also what transaction that goes, the type of the loans that you actually move into the trust. Make sure you actually don't find yourself at the back of Section 7C. It's one of the common things that people don't actually, they overlook. When you donate to trust, Section 7 is one of the things. Are your children beneficiaries who are minors? Are you distributing? What type of income do you actually move to them? Because that can easily come back to you if you actually give it to the to the minors. If you had donated that particular asset, why can't you give them dividends instead of you know what I mean, that type of income that is actually even more exempt? So those are some of the things that, as part of the trust administration, you need to ask that kind of a question actually to your advisors or a panel of your experts. Hopefully, if you are using Intergen, then you pretty much knowing that these are some of the things that as and when. That's why I'm saying that your factors or your events in your life actually changes. As they change, as you go up one transaction with a trust, rather consider to do it on your own. I think that's what you guys need to do. Any transaction that you want to do, rather consult. Next slide, Bruno. So now, this is a classical example. So because this person did not do the proper administration, right? And they end up disposing these properties. And so when they say, hang on, you actually sold these two properties. And this is a live case, by the way, guys. You actually sold this, but we don't recognize this property. Because remember, when you're selling the properties, conveyancers will end up saying, Mr. Sars, we need clearance, we need this. You know, Bruno will attest to that, right? So Sars said, but hang on, who's the owner of these properties? Only to find out it's the trust. Oh, Mr. So-and-so, what happened? We don't have tax numbers here. The trust, this property has been making money. We have not. Can you see the mess that this person end up finding themselves in? So we've got a capital gain of about 160,000 in the other one, 170. So that's a lot of money. He could have just used, the next slide you see, he had beneficiaries who are his kids, right? He could have just used these kids and distribute these. Because of lower tax brackets, the tax would have not even been paid. You'll see in the next slide. Bruno, do you want to show the next slide? This is a classical example. Because of these three beneficiaries, we could have just divided this capital gain across, distributed using conjugate power principle, and give to these beneficiaries being younger children with no income of that sort, right? And then they would have taken advantage of 40,000 that I explained previously. Then they are left with a capital gain. And then we apply inclusionary rate of a natural person of 40%. Because of tax threshold, can you see, end up paying zero tax. But because this gentleman, oh, he thought, no, man, I don't need to do a proper administration. I'm not going to pay Intergen. Well, he's not my client. I'm just giving Intergen as an example. Then he didn't do a proper trust administration. Then SARS said, no, man, this is an alter ego trust. They went to tax court. He was found to actually having what you call an alter ego. So they then attributed, say there's no separation between the trust and you, Mr. Founder. Then as a result, the whole capital gain went to him. He's a high net worth individual like you sitting here. Well done. You're not going to make this mistake, right? Are you? So you can't, because you've got Intergen on your side. This gentleman end up paying 40,000, right? It's a small money for you sitting here, of course, right? But imagine a scenario where if these properties were in millions, what was going to happen? And by the way, this is just not a tax for it. There are penalties that comes with those previous incomes in the previous years that he has not actually been declaring. And by the way, he might find himself paying legal fees because these things, once they start going to court now, this is where the attorneys and advocates comes in. But guys, I want to say thank you so much for having us. It has been a pleasure. I think my understanding is that we're gonna be back for Q&A. Have those questions, but be nice to me. Don't ask a difficult question. You can throw the difficult questions to Bruno and Andrew, but not me. And you can be nice to me, right? So I'm looking forward to engaging with you guys, myself and Bruno. And thank you to the team of Sub.
Awesome.
Thanks,
there we
everyone.
go. Well done, Chili Boy. Thank you, Bruno. Bruno, I think Bruno had issues with his phone over there, but no problem. My phone just, my laptop's working for a few seconds. So, was that useful, ladies and gentlemen? In the chat box, I see there are quite a few questions. Just let the internet catch up there. It'll take a few seconds. Let me get my Prezzo back up. Okay, there we go. Let me close it. Let me close this. Give me 1 second. Let me get this sorted for you so it's all done nicely. Quite a heavy session, ladies and gents. I hope you did enjoy that, though. Let me share my screen over here for you all. In the chat box, let me know, was that useful? Did you all get something out of it? And remember, questions. I'll tell you what, Chili Boy loves the most complicated questions. So if you want to ask Chili Boy or Bruno some questions, pop it into that chat box. We will copy and paste it into a spreadsheet and write it down, and make sure you stay right to the end to ensure that not only you may be a contender to win the free game, but you get to ask all the questions. Okay, so let's see where we are. Let me know if you're all good. Say I'm all good. Let me know. So, yep, Andrew, we are good. Landazuza, was that good? Longelwe, Johan? Tommy, hope you enjoyed that. Okay, there we go. All good. Ready to rock and roll. Okay, so where are we in the signature solution? We have just done point number 4. Can you see how we go through each step in detail? And you'll see by the end of tomorrow how all these puzzle pieces are going to come together. And next up, but not right now, we're going to take a short break. Before we take a short break, you've heard some people mention about coaching, and Shirley Boy mentioned it, Leon mentioned it, I mentioned it. Why don't we actually go into just a testimonial, some words from a gentleman called Sifiso Gabela that I've personally been working with for quite a long time now. He's a prime example of someone that started off doing small buy-to-let and then multi-let, did a very cool flip, and now he's probably landed on what might be the deal of 2021. The video that you're going to watch in a few seconds was shot at the property. It's about 12,000 square meters, and he's going to be developing a lot of units, and this deal is probably going to be the deal that sets him free. So, Nico, if you don't mind playing the video, that'll be great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sifiso Gabela. By day, I am a maintenance manager, and then by night, which is what I love, I'm a property investor. And I'm from Germiston, which is where I normally invest. I started my journey back in 2007, I believe, and then it didn't go right. I didn't do well in terms of my investment journey. And so I decided to quit for some time, and then resuscitated my journey again in 2017. And then that time I made sure that I get a coach, to ensure that I don't repeat the similar mistakes that I did the last time. So now I had to get someone who's gonna, hold my hand and show me the ropes in terms of what is in and how to go about running my property journey as a business. I'm currently involved in multi-lets, right? So, and now my journey is moving further into development. So as you grow, you really need to have a good team on your side. You need to have a good power team. You need to have the people that you can trust within your journey, especially, and a coach as well. So if you don't have those people, I'm sure your journey is going to be very difficult and you might as well just give up on a good thing. Whereas if you had gotten yourself a coach as well as a power team, you would have been on your way into success. So from the coaching, I've had to do it as a business. As part of the process, I've even registered my company, which is GBL Properties. I learned how to market myself as well as my properties, as well as how to get, even how to run this as a business. If you look at if you listen to my tenants nowadays, you hear that Sfiso is very professional in what it does. So that is what you get in terms of coaching. I would highly recommend that you get yourself a coach. I mean, even if it's sports, even the top athletes in the world, if you've listened to their journey and how they got there, it's because of a coach. So it's a no-brainer that you get yourself a coach, the one who's going to ensure that your property journey is the one that is successful. So go out there, take that leap of faith and get yourself a coach. It will save you money, quite a lot of money in the process, save you time. I mean, a coach will ensure that you get fast-tracked. So it's a no-brainer that you get yourself a property coach.
Excellent. That is Sfiso Gabelo. Thank you very much for that, Sfiso. That is great. And you'll see him, he has already entered the Investor of the Year 2021, which is fantastic. And his deal, I reckon, is going to be one of those where it could be under the Investor of the Year, the Deal of the Year, which is super exciting. Okay, ladies and gents, so what I suggest we do is we'll take a quick break. What you'll find is under the video, where you're currently watching, there's some links or little boxes saying chat to Dan, chat to Alani. But I'm going to ask Alani to post her link into the chat box, and Daniel, please post your link. And if you want to chat to Daniel, Daniel is one of my coaching students. I've taken him under my wing. Daniel's helped other students choose the right property coach. Just chat to Daniel today, chat to Alani, and book yourself a 10-minute consultation with them today. What's going to happen next is, yes, we will break. Let's just take a 5-minute break, get some coffee, shake your arms, stretch that neck. It is getting to afternoon session. Don't get tired. Stand up, walk around. And when we come back, we're going to have Michael Bowen talking about your property toolkit, talking about how to mitigate risk as a property investor. And after that, I will then talk to you about the convention offer for this weekend. And after that, we'll then bring all the speakers together and we're going to hit that Q&A panel. So keep those questions going. Okay, ladies and gents, the time is, I would just say be back in 5 minutes. Okay, just be back in 5 minutes, and we're going to get started then. See you all soon.